Instagram is one of the most popular social media platforms in the world. In 2018, it surpassed the milestone of 1 billion monthly active users, and by 2022, that number had reportedly doubled to 2 billion users. That is almost hard to believe, considering there are only about 8 billion people on Earth, meaning a quarter of everyone alive today is actively using Instagram. It has allowed us to share photos and communicate with each other on a scale that would have been impossible at any other time in human history. It's pretty crazy when you think about it. They have said that their mission is to capture and share the world's moments, and I do think they achieved that. Now, I have to recognize that along with those other platforms, there are potential negative effects to using it, such as depression and anxiety, fear of missing out, and feeling inferior when you see all the cool stuff everyone else is posting, selectively making their lives look so amazing. All of those are very real concerns that should make us cautious, but however you feel about Instagram, it has undeniably been among the biggest success stories of the past couple decades. Something that didn't exist until 2010 is being used by billions of people, and I think that's impressive enough to take a deeper look into how that happened. So for this video, I want to talk about the evolution of Instagram while identifying what I believe to be 5 of the biggest reasons behind its success. Starting off with Kevin Systrom. He was the co-founder and CEO of Instagram for the first 8 years, being the main person in charge while it attracted those first billion users. And Kevin Systrom had what I would consider to be the perfect background to start a company like this. He was originally from Massachusetts, where his mother worked in the tech industry. For college in the early 2000s, he moved across the country to Silicon Valley to attend Stanford University. After graduating with a degree in management science and engineering, he worked for Google for 2 years and then another website called Nextstop. While working there, he spent his nights and weekends learning how to code and independently started developing his own app, so clearly he was intelligent, ambitious, and familiar with the industry. He also built up connections over that time that would later prove to be useful, like back in 2004 when Mark Zuckerberg was in the early days of developing Facebook when it was still called The Facebook at the time. He unsuccessfully tried to convince Systrom to drop out of college and work for him. For a college internship, Systrom worked for an early podcasting company called Odeo, where he worked with people who became key figures behind Twitter. He even said that he basically shared a desk with Jack Dorsey for 3 months. Jack Dorsey, of course, went on to be a co-founder of Twitter and serve as CEO of it for about 15 years. Additionally, Kevin Systrom had an interest in photography. In high school, he was the president of the photography club and even spent some time in college studying photography in Italy. So, between his experience in the Silicon Valley tech industry, his connections with people who became some of the most powerful within that industry, and his passion for photography, you could see why I think he was pretty much the perfect person to start a company like Instagram. In fact, he is going to be a major factor in every other reason on my list. So I'm going to move on to the next one and talk about simplicity. I don't have too much to say here, but most people will tell you that Instagram is fairly easy to use. Taking photos, adding filters, sharing them, it's all pretty fast and straightforward, as it should be. Maybe this doesn't even sound like an important factor, but I couldn't tell you how many times I've gotten frustrated with an app or a website because the layout or the functionality or whatever else was confusing. It's actually been a popular complaint against Twitter over the years, but with Instagram, simplicity has always been a primary concern, making sure the users have to press as few buttons as possible for any given function. In 2009, when Kevin Systrom was working at Nextstop learning to code in his free time and building an app, well, that app was called Bourbon, spelled without the O's. It did allow you to share photos, but the primary focus of it was to share your location with people, along the same lines as Foursquare. As a matter of fact, Foursquare had just come out earlier that year, and test groups were seeing Bourbon as a more complicated version of it. He was in a tough situation. He had just quit his job, recruited an engineer he knew from Stanford named Mike Krieger to be his business partner, secured $500,000 from investors, and he was quickly learning that his app was too complex and not all that unique. His solution was to completely shift the focus of it toward the photos. See, the iPhone 4 with a greatly improved camera had just been released, selling 1.7 million units within 3 days in what Steve Jobs called the most successful product launch in Apple's history. It motivated Systrom and Krieger to spend the next 8 weeks redeveloping Bourbon into an iPhone photo sharing app by eliminating almost all the other parts of it. Oddly enough, the first photo they uploaded to it was of a random dog that they found near a taco stand while they were visiting Mexico. By October, they had renamed it Instagram as a combination of the words instant and telegram, I would say a much better name, and they launched it to the public where it was almost almost an instant success. All of their expectations were exceeded when so many people downloaded it that their servers kept crashing. 25,000 people signed up within the first day, and that was up to 1 million in less than 3 months. All impressive numbers, but keep in mind that there were many other comparable apps on the market at the time. It brings me to the next reason behind their success, where I'm going to group together filters and sharing. I mean, these are two of the things that Instagram is most known for. That is why a lot of people use it, so they can apply cool or artistic or funny filters to their photos and share them with their friends or followers, right? So obviously, providing the tools to do it has been a huge factor in their success. Kevin Systrom says that he had the idea of adding filters when he was talking to his girlfriend about how to improve that initial bourbon app. She said she didn't like posting photos to it because someone else that was testing it was posting photos that looked so much better than hers. That's when he realized that the other person was using an outside filter app to alter them, and it would be smart to include that feature into his app. Early on, an app called Pick Please was a notable competitor. It was available months before Instagram even came out, already with over 100,000 downloads, but it didn't offer filters and effects until after Instagram came out. On the other end, Hipstamatic was another competitor already well established before Instagram. In 2010, Apple even named their app the App of the Year. People were attracted by their filters and editing tools, but they were lacking the social media end. There weren't easy and convenient ways to share the photos that people had edited, so again, Instagram was looking more attractive. Right out the gate, they had the filters and sharing capabilities that were better developed and more appealing than anything else on the market, and it made them stand out. For my next reason, I'm gonna have to say Facebook, or Meta as it's now called, has been important to Instagram's success. For less than 2 years, Instagram and Facebook were direct competitors, and that both of them were trying to get people to share photos using their platform. Well, the way I understand it is that in 2012, when Instagram had just surpassed 30 million users, a sizable user base, they finally released their Android app, being only available for iPhone up until that point. It was part of the motivation for Systrom's former colleague Jack Dorsey, as the head of Twitter, to offer $500 million to acquire Instagram. Mark Zuckerberg over at Facebook didn't want two of his biggest competitors to combine, so seemingly to prevent that from happening, he quickly swooped in with an uncharacteristic $1 billion offer to acquire Instagram. It was twice the value that they had been assigned in a recent round of funding, and obviously twice the amount Twitter was offering. It was considered to be Facebook's first major acquisition too, paying 10 times more for it than anything they had bought before, though they did acquire WhatsApp for considerably more money less than 2 years later. Facebook had been busy developing their own separate photo sharing app, but this was a much faster and effective way of taking control of that market. Whatever the circumstances, Facebook became the new owner of Instagram, and ever since has been that larger company providing much needed support as far as design, marketing, engineering teams, allowing Instagram to add all of these new features over the years, such as video sharing in 2013 to compete with Vine and Reels in 2020 to compete with TikTok, among many others. And despite having 30 million users at the time of the acquisition, Instagram had no revenue and only 13 employees. That's why it took them so long to come out with the Android app. So clearly, the growth of the platform has been much smoother under the control of Facebook than it would have been otherwise. When they hit that 1 billion user milestone, Mark Zuckerberg himself said, "We believe Instagram has been able to use Facebook's infrastructure to grow more than twice as quickly as it would have on its own." Systrom and Krieger continued to serve as CEO and CTO of Instagram under the control of Facebook until they both left their positions in 2018. That is a whole other subject that could be explored, but the reason reported behind it was tensions with Mark Zuckerberg over the direction of Instagram. Moving on to my final reason behind Instagram's success, I'm gonna say it's stories. In short, an Instagram story is something that you post on the app that disappears after 24 hours. It sounds simple enough, but introducing this feature in 2016 was a genius move. Consider that people were getting hesitant to post anything on Instagram, and that was a problem. There could be a lot of pressure there. Everyone's going to see it, it's going to be there forever, so you have to make sure you look good and the angle is right and the lighting is perfect, and let's just say that a lot of people take photos that they don't necessarily feel are Instagram worthy. Well, Snapchat was established as kind of an alternative to that. Their whole concept is based on the fact that the stuff you share will disappear. Since it's going to be gone soon, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's kind of like the opposite of Instagram. In 2013, Snapchat introduced Stories. It shows photos in chronological enable order that will be deleted in 24 hours. Well, that same year, Instagram offered $3 billion to buy Snapchat. The offer was rejected, so in 2016, they pretty much copied Snapchat by introducing a suspiciously similar feature that was also called Stories. Kevin Systrom pretty much admits to taking the idea from Snapchat, saying they deserve all the credits. Since Instagram Stories added a few small improvements like the ability to pause and go back on the slideshow, and because Instagram has a much bigger user base, that's where everyone's at, they quickly surpassed Snapchat in popularity. I've made a video that talks about the success and struggles of Snapchat, and as part of it, I talk about how Instagram copying them potentially hurt their business. And the stories aren't the only features they adapted from Snapchat. They have also followed their lead with lenses and disappearing messages, so you can debate the legality and ethicality of all of it, but these additions have been helpful for Instagram. Let me know in the comments, are you among the 2 billion monthly active Instagram users? And if so, why do you use it? And what would you say are some of the biggest reasons behind their success? I want to remind you that my list is not complete. It is only what I believe to be the top reasons. So tell me if you think anything should be added or subtracted from it. I think this is such an interesting story that heavily involves some of the other biggest social media platforms. So it shows how they have helped and hurt each other and how it's all connected in different ways. So any other thoughts you have about Instagram or any of the other social media platforms, leave them in the comments. I'd like to hear what you have to say. Snapchat is a popular social media app that famously gives people the ability to share photos and messages that can only be accessed for a short period of time before they disappear. It sounds simple enough, but has proven to be an extremely clever multi-billion-dollar idea. I think most would consider it to be one of the biggest technology success stories. It was started in 2011 by 3 college students. Within 2 years, it was worth over $1 billion. In 2017, it had an abnormally successful initial public stock offering that valued the company at $24 billion, and in 2021, their market capitalization reached an all-time high that was right around $130 billion. Now, I'm not trying to say that it was a perfect decade for Snapchat. They have always been facing various issues, but turning nothing into $100 billion within that time is impressive. However, the following 2 years were not nearly as impressive, considering they have since lost most of that value. In 2022, as part of a restructuring effort, they announced plans to lay off more than 1,200 employees, which represented about 20% of their workforce. To go along with that, some high-ranking executives over at Snapchat left the company, and in early 2023, they reported a quarterly decline in sales for the first time ever that was followed by another decline in sales the following quarter. Now, I'm also not trying to say that Snapchat is becoming irrelevant or falling apart. In fact, the app is being used by something like 400 million people every day, which is actually higher than ever before. It has been growing pretty consistently from the beginning. Clearly, there's been a lot happening here, so in this video, I want to try to make sense of all of it as I talk about the rise and potential fall of Snapchat. For my first reason behind their success, I'm going to start at the beginning with the founders of Snapchat, mainly Evan Spiegel, who has led the company as CEO the entire time and at age 25 became one of the world's youngest billionaires. Though I should point out that, not surprisingly, his net worth has fallen considerably since 2021. The details surrounding the origin of the company are a bit messy, they're disputed and not entirely clear, but from what I can gather, Evan Spiegel was a student at Stanford University who worked with another student named Reggie Brown to develop an idea for a photo disappearing application. They brought on a computer science major named Bobby Murphy who had the programming knowledge to turn it into a reality, and collectively they launched the app under the name Picaboo. You have to admit, that is a clever name. You know, like peekaboo, but it's for a picture that disappears, so it's Picaboo. Maybe I'm over-explaining it, but it does explain why they have that cute little ghost as the logo, because the boo part that used to be in the name. According to Reggie Brown, he was the one who not only came up with the name, but the entire concept. It gets a bit blurry here with differing stories, but it appears that the other two had disagreements with Reggie Brown, cut him out of the business, denied his contributions, and relaunched the app a few months later without him under the new name of Snapchat. Snapchat. Reggie Brown later filed a lawsuit that ultimately led to a $150 million settlement in his favor. That is a very high-level overview of the situation, but Evan Spiegel continued on leading the company and can be considered a driving force behind everything else that I'm going to talk about. My next reason behind the success is, in fact, the disappearing photos and messages and videos. Snapchat has obviously expanded into different directions, but this is at the center of it. When you post something on social media, you typically want it to be as perfect as possible, right? You want to look great, you want to say the right thing, you want to, I don't know, position the camera perfectly. It is going to be there for a long time, with potentially a lot of people looking at it, so it's a lot of pressure that isn't there in the same way with Snapchat. Since whatever you do will disappear shortly, you can make mistakes, you can look less presentable, you can be goofy. It allows communication to be more honest and closer to what you might actually do when you're in person. Look, I'm not trying to make a commercial for Snapchat here, but that is the appeal. It gained a strong following among younger individuals too, partially because it's a fun way to communicate with friends that typically can't be seen by parents. Another reason behind the success over the years is innovation. The company spends a lot of money on research and development. Anyone who's been using Snapchat for an extended period of time has seen how much the app has evolved. Notably, there's lenses and filters and stories where it shows photos in chronological order that then are deleted after 24 hours. Snapchat was the company to popularize a lot of this stuff, so oftentimes they have been ahead of the curve. They have also been ambitious outside of the app, developing different glasses that could be used with it, and even a selfie drone called a Pixie that they stopped working on when things started to fall. Another reason behind the success is making everything easy to use, specifically the camera. They have always put a huge emphasis on it, even identifying themselves as a camera company at one point with the slogan, "A new kind of camera." Obviously, the app is centered around the camera, but think about the extent of it. When you first open it, it is on the camera. You tap the button to take a photo, but hold it down to take a video. They designed it that way because it can get confusing switching between them. On the standard camera app, how many times have you taken a photo when you meant to take a video? Or the other way around. And arguably, communicating with photos like you do on the app can be more efficient than using text. A picture is worth 1,000 words, right? So they have created a simple and fun way to communicate using photos. Finally, my last reason is debatable, but I'm going to say that they have been successful because they have been slow to monetize. Especially early on, their biggest concern was growing their user base and trusting that they'll eventually figure out how to make money from all of those users. Essentially, all of their efforts were put toward creating an attractive app that people would want to download and use often. In fact, the average user checks it something like 20 times a day, and you might be surprised to hear that Snapchat was already a multi-billion-dollar company with almost 70 million people using it daily before they ever collected any money. They have been very careful with experimenting with different ways to make money. Originally, they tried to sell people additional creative tools. You know, you could get new lenses for a small fee or something like that, but after only a few months, they realized that they were not selling too many of them, and people were actually using lenses less often because of it. That's when they shifted toward the more successful sponsored creative tools, where the revenue comes from various companies instead of the users. They also started showing ads within stories. The first one, oddly enough, being for the horror movie Ouija in October of 2014. Then, early the following year, they started their Discover section that displays ads. As of today, they have slowly built their advertising revenue to $4 billion each year, which sadly needs to be way higher. Evan Spiegel himself has admitted we are still far from achieving the revenue growth to which we aspire. It is a perfect transition for me to start talking about the potential struggles facing Snapchat, because even though being slow to monetize has been an effective strategy for them in the past, things have been going really slow, and eventually they have to figure out how to bring in more money, and believe me, they have been working on it. The core of the issue is the fact that, unlike most social media, Snapchat is commonly used for people to message other people that they already know, rather than promoting new creators or influencers that aren't in your personal life. Does that make sense? It goes back to the way it was built, and it is very hard to make money from online advertising when your main business is personal messages. In 2021, things became even more complicated when Apple changed their privacy policy in a way that made it harder for Snapchat to track how well certain ads were doing, so that made it harder to target ads to certain users. It made the system less efficient, and then just economic factors like inflation motivated many companies to spend less money on advertising, which specifically hurt Snapchat because they are comparatively smaller. What I mean here is that when there's less money to spend, companies are more likely to use it on bigger, more proven platforms like YouTube or TikTok or Instagram. And let me talk about Instagram for a second here, because they have always been Snapchat's biggest rival. In 2012, you may already know that Facebook bought Instagram for $1 billion, but what you may not know is the following year, they attempted to buy Snapchat for triple that amount. $3 billion is a lot of money to pay for a 2-year-old company that had yet to collect any revenue. It would have been their biggest acquisition ever at that time. Snapchat turned down the offer, went on to create many new features for the app that were then pretty much mimicked by Instagram. I'm talking about messages that disappear and filters and stories and whatever else, and in many cases, the Instagram version of the feature is preferred by the user, if for nothing else because it was integrated into a bigger platform that more of their friends or followers were using. You can see how it's been hard to compete against them, especially at times when Snapchat's reputation has been harmed, like in 2013 when a security breach led to 4.6 million users having their personal information leaked online, or in 2018 when Kylie Jenner made a negative tweet about them following their redesigned layout that was not popular with most users. There was even a petition signed by over 1 million people to get them to change it. Or just a month after that when Rihanna spoke negatively about them on Instagram because an ad was featured on Snapchat that was pretty inappropriate toward her, to say the least. I know these might seem like trivial celebrity incidents, but these are highly influential people that were able to affect Snapchat more than you might expect. The bottom line here is that Snapchat has been having a hard time making money. They have literally been posting losses every year since the beginning. Every year they operate, they lose hundreds of millions of dollars. They have introduced a revenue sharing program that has attracted creators and led to more public stories being posted. They have started a subscription service called Snapchat Plus that allows access to additional features that has gained over 5 million users within only a few months. But at $3.99 per person, that is well under 1% of their business. So there are still big problems over at Snapchat that eventually have to be addressed, hopefully before their investors lose confidence in them or their users move to a different platform. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about Snapchat? As a user, do you prefer them over Instagram or any of the other social medias, and why do you feel that way? Also, the company itself, it's officially called Snap Incorporated. Where do you think they are headed? Are they going to get their act together and figure out some good ways to make money and start turning a profit, or are they going to continue to decline and ultimately go down in history as a failed experiment? And any other thoughts you have about Snapchat, leave them in the comments. I'd like to hear what you